So this week, of course, here we are. It's now a week after the election. And there's a lot of things to examine here. The state of the race at this point. What are the chances of President Trump to pull this out? The lawsuits that are currently in play. And some of the real challenges and questions about whether this has truly been an open and fair and honest election. I think these are legitimate questions to ask. We're going to dive into a lot of this now. Let me start first by just reminding everybody of where we stand in the numbers. Yeah, the media, everybody seems to be declaring Joe Biden as the winner. They're referring to him as, quote, president-elect. But I do want to remind everybody of something, okay? There is nothing wrong with President Trump pursuing every possible legal avenue to make sure that illegal and invalid votes are not wrongly counted. Now, if he prevails in these lawsuits in these states and invalid votes are properly invalidated, will that be enough to flip the scales and put the president in the lead in some of these key states? That we don't know. We'll talk about that as well. But let me just suggest to everybody, and guys, I want to throw this out on the table first. This nonsense that we're hearing from Democrats and the media that Donald Trump has some kind of civic responsibility to concede and that he's dragging the nation through a lot of ugliness right now by refusing to give up and concede, and the media calling Joe Biden president-elect. I just want to remind everybody of something and then get your take on this. 20 years ago this month in Al Gore versus George Bush, right, it took Al Gore 37 days to concede that election. He continued for 37 days in the courts, in lawsuit after lawsuit in Florida, specifically trying to get recounts only in Democrat counties, but not Republican counties. The big legal battle over a hanging Chad and a dimpled Chad and what constitutes a vote or not. And the media and the Democrats were cheering him on, saying, hey, this is how it works. So if he was allowed to go 37 days, President Trump has only been about a week fighting this right now. So knock it off with the President Trump has a responsibility to concede. I think that's nonsense right now.
Well, and wasn't it Hillary Clinton just in August telling Joe Biden not to concede no matter what if he was on the other end of this?
Good point.
That's
Good
right.
point. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So
what did she know that we didn't know?
Great one.
Was she anticipating something like this happening potentially? I mean, going back to Bob, your point, the fact that the recount that so many people talk about, the Supreme Court stole the election from Al Gore. No, they didn't. The Supreme Court said stop counting. You've counted and counted and counted and counted. Every time you keep coming up with the same number, stop counting. I mean, stop cherry picking your different counties. We saw this happen in Georgia. I mean, where you look at the states overwhelmingly red, and yet the blue counties all had miraculously huge turnouts, and all of a sudden now the president doesn't win. There are tons of irregularities that are well worth it to us as American citizens to check out. And if for some reason they check them all out, they find some indiscretions, some voter fraud, whatever it is, but it doesn't sway the course of the election, then we can say, okay, at least justice was served and the Constitution was preserved and we should move on. But this idea that somehow Trump should just need to, I saw it once again, what Joe Biden said, it's an embarrassment that Donald Trump hasn't, already conceded. It's not. It's an embarrassment that the Democrats and the media in general are just moving forward and saying, no, we've already got this figured out, and it's shameful for you to not concede yet. I mean, come on, it's 8 days after the election as we're recording this.
Yeah, and I imagine most of you guys have seen this, on social media, but there's a post that's kind of floating around out there that says, the same people that are telling us to accept the results of this election just spent the last 4 years not accepting the results of an election.
Right.
Think about it.
Oh,
right,
I know.
Fair point. Yeah. Well said.
It's very true. Actually, John, let me ask you, though, wouldn't it be nice if just one reporter would ask Joe Biden, instead of all the softballs that are thrown out to him, just ask him, would you agree that any and all illegal and invalid ballots should be removed? Would you agree with that? Of course, he's not going to say that. President Trump and his team is saying count every legal vote. And to me, that word legal is an important thing because we cannot have a banana republic in this country, John, where illegal votes, invalid votes, votes that are outside of the law, now suddenly they're counted as well. That's not the way that it works in the United States of America, or it shouldn't be.
No, it should not be. And we want, for the integrity of the country moving forward, we want to make sure that we have fair, upright, and moral, I guess is what I would call it, elections, where you know that each vote is not only counted, but that vote is legal in the first place, and everything is done the way it's supposed to. In other words, if votes come in a day late, no offense, guys, they shouldn't be counted. That's the system we have, and that's how things should work. If we have a polling place that allows you to be in line and actually vote in person, and as long as you're in line by the time they close, great. But once that door closes and the last guy in line is done, you can't go in an hour later and vote.
Right.
That's what late votes coming in the mail would actually be. And it's also interesting, guys, I talked about this yesterday, that what I consider to be not a very right-leaning organization called Real Clear Politics put Biden-Harris back to 259 on the electoral count, and they're waiting for some of these states to determine what they're going to do when it comes to some of what we're talking about on legal aspects. And so a very left-leaning organization, a media organization, if you would, just came out and basically said, no, Joe, you're not quite the president yet.
Right. Well, it's such an important point that you make, John, about ballots that come in late. And here's a perfect example of this. And this is one of the things that just makes my eye twitch. Pennsylvania right now. Now, in Pennsylvania, the law, the actual state law passed by the legislature states that the only ballots that are valid are ballots that arrive by Election Day. The law doesn't say postmarked by Election Day. The law says arrived by Election Day. And it's not just Pennsylvania. Georgia has that law. There's other states that have that law.
We have that law, by the way, here in Colorado. It's no different here.
Yeah, so a legislature can decide in a state, do we want our state election laws to be postmarked by Election Day or arrive by Election Day? You can make that decision at the state level. That decision's been made in Pennsylvania. But what did the Democrats do? Because they run the election commission and because you got a Democrat governor in Pennsylvania, they just decided we're going to change the law on our own, and we're going to say that it's postmarked by Election Day and give 3 days for them to show up. And then the Democrats on the Pennsylvania Supreme Court say, yeah, sounds good to us. So to me, guys, this is perfectly appropriate for President Trump and his team of attorneys to hopefully get the U.S. Supreme Court to say you have to follow Pennsylvania law. Any votes that came in after 8 p.m. when the polls closed on Tuesday, Election Day, are invalid votes. It's no different. John, I said the same thing to my audience, that if I showed up at the polls the next day and I said, oh, by the way, here's my ballot, or I went into the clerk's office, okay, here's my ballot, they're going to be like, sorry, you missed it. The window's closed. This was yesterday. Well, yeah, but here's my ballot. I wasn't able to make it out yesterday, so here it is today. They're like,
Bob,
no, it's not going to count.
No, go one step further even. It's not even the next day. Again, if the polls close at 7, and the way it used to work in Colorado when we did in-person voting is as long as you were in line at 7, they would let you cast your ballot. But if you showed up at 8 o'clock to get in line, the reality is, because they would mark and say, okay, all these people are in line as of 7 o'clock, you're the last guy that can vote. If somebody walked up to the line even 20 minutes later, guess what? They're not voting.